Mental health. 2020, we had 34. 2019, we had 18 incidents. 2018, we had 12, and an 88% increase. I also just put in there calls to 4 wins, which could just be various calls to 4 wins. So far this year, we've had 50. Last year, we had 39, and in 2018, we had 35. Overdoses, I have 12 for the year. 2019, we had 6, so 100% increase in overdoses. 2018, we had 4. Harassment, aggravated harassment included, we had a 110% increase. 2020, we had 40 incidents. 2019, 19. 2018, 28. So
just to get an idea overall, Chief, what's the total number of calls to date? I know you're giving all this.
I don't have that in front of me.
Okay.
But that's an easy one. I could get that.
Yeah, just.
Chief, oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Siciliano has a question. He's been raising his hand.
Appreciate it. I was just trying to piggyback on that. As I'm looking at this, and maybe I'm wrong, but it would appear that the procedure would be the same as to whether or not the individual is 18 or older or 18 or below. And I'm just wondering, in the context of this conversation, is there anything that the committee should be considering in terms of who should accompany this call if it's known that it's a minor?
I'll look into that, Stephen. I'll get back to you in the committee.
My question is, I'm assuming that whether or not a call involves a mentally or emotionally disturbed person comes to light at different points in time. I would assume that the 911 call itself, someone says there's an issue with the person and they know that person has an issue. But maybe you could describe, what happens when you go to a 911 call where it's not reported that it is a mentally or emotionally disturbed person involved. At what point do you determine that? What factors come into that? And when, what I'm saying? Like when is it that I guess I'm just looking for a little bit of a different case scenarios as to when that factor comes to light, the different points of time when that factor comes to light, and how you approach that situation differently with each circumstance.
Okay. Do you want to tell? Joel, can you unmute the sergeant, please?
Okay, Andrea, from what I understand what you're trying to say is, obviously a 911 call is just initially what gets us to a scene. Obviously from there, we're going to investigate it. Many of these type of calls aren't resolved during that initial response. There's a lot of follow-up from our department. There's a lot of resources that are used throughout the county to follow up. What we're discussing as far as actual statistics of calls, the initial call that's a very short window into what each of these incidents turn into. So like, I guess you're trying to say, at what point do we go from responding to it becoming a mental health type incident?
Right. My point is, you guys don't always know what you're walking into. It's like you don't know when you're driving to a scene that it's necessarily involving a mentally or emotionally disturbed person. Because there's been a lot of conversation. I think the last meeting and in prior meetings around the town about having like a social worker ride along, or something of that nature. And my point is that when the police department responds, they don't always know ahead of time what the situation will involve or what it needs.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, is this a feedback on you?
I don't know.
Hold on. There we go. That's the problem with the chief and I being in the same room. So yes, like you're saying, I mean, someone calls us to a scene. So obviously they're the ones requesting the help. As most of you know in the committee, we have those resources throughout the county that we use. I mean, that's something we've already discussed as far as county mental health, and we do use it on a regular basis. Yeah, I'm gonna kind of mix up.
I have a list in front of me. Let me just wait for you. Muted.
There you go.
I have a list in front of me for mental health resources as well as domestic violence resources and chemical dependency services that are available. I mean, it's a significant page. I could run through all of them. As far as mental health, because that's the topic we're actually on right now, we are assigned by Westchester County two individuals, Desh Edwards and Mark Giuliano. And the number one contact is Desh Edwards. So these are 24/7 contacts that we could contact them out on the scene. They provide their cell phone numbers. So it's kind of like a hotline that we call if we have any mental health questions at the scene. Also, we could follow up. We've worked with social services numerous times. I know the sergeant recently had a social service worker meet us at headquarters, took them out, took the lady out to the scene and sat down with the individual and went over their options.
Spent an hour sitting on the couch talking about.
They spent over an hour sitting on the couch talking with that individual, and that's with the social worker. So it happened. It's already happening. And the same thing with domestic violence. Patricia, we could go into that in the next session regarding domestic violence with all the services that we have already. Chemical dependency. Again, we have all your local hospitals. You have Arms Acres, Lexington Center, Four Winds, same with mental health. So we have all these resources. Every officer has this whole list of resources and we do utilize them. We do follow up subjects with overdoses, mental health issues, and we do provide them with these.
Dave, how many of
Go
these,
back to Andrea's question. A lot of EDP calls come in as a domestic. So we will reevaluate them, reclassify them as a mental health incident. And then, because the problem is that a lot of your domestic violence are mandatory arrests. So we will reclassify them as a mental health incident to get the person help and not just arrested.
Dave, how many of these calls that you go on are repetitious? I mean,
Parsons, can you just start over? You're coming in all echoed online.
sorry,
There you go.
how many of these calls are repetitious? I could imagine somebody with a mental health problem that the calls are fairly frequent about the same individual.
There's a small percentage, and of course, we really definitely repeat customers.
Was everyone able to hear Andrew in the background through my computer?
Could you repeat it?
2019 and 2018, I feel like you had a lot of the repeat customers. This year, probably with the COVID and everything else going on in 2020, there's definitely a lot more new faces.
Okay.
But that's our use of the county resources is to combat that repeat customers, try to get the help that they need. So we aren't returning to the same person over and over again, trying to actually resolve their situation.
So the county resources are pretty successful.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes.
Even the outside resources as well. Some people.
But that's worthwhile noting is that, they do manage to resolve a certain number of these.
Absolutely. And once again, we are called to the scene because it's a 911 call because somebody's life or property is threatened. They called 911 because they were in fear. You're not going to send a social worker into a scene when tensions are high and emotions are high. So we'll secure the scene and then we get them the resources that they needed.
Now, that's fine, I assume, during daylight hours, but how about in the late evening?
We still have, you still have your 24/7 contacts for the social workers with the county.
Okay,
Before the two gentlemen, as well as you have Northern Westchester Hospital, you have Westchester Medical Center, You have Norwalk Hospital, which all have intakes, so we would transport them with either Vista EMS or LVAC, and they would transport them to the appropriate facility, and we would either follow or ride with the ambulance.
Okay.
Anybody else on mental health?
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
I'm just curious. I mean, I have some conjecture type comments, not hard data comments, and I'd rather be in the hard data line, but I worked as a chaplain at Westchester Medical Center in trauma, right? So I hear what you're saying about you don't send in a social worker, but they would send in a chaplain sometimes as part of a team to try to de-escalate. You know, I had to take de-escalation training as part of my chaplaincy training there. And they did have social workers on staff, you know, in the behavioral health unit. So I guess I'm just throwing the question out there as to, you know, it's not always the situation that that someone other than police can respond to de-escalate a situation, in my experience. So I just
I understand what you're saying, Nikki, but I'm sure those people that are already in those hospitals have already been dealt with, the police already dealt with them and dropped them off to that facility, is what I'm assuming. Or they're in a lower classification.
Right. Sometimes these were people that were in, you know, in the trauma bays, for physical medical ailments, and then a mental health situation would erupt. But yeah, you're right. Sometimes they were coming in as mental health patients. Agreed. Yeah.
Ms.
Go ahead.
Morrissey has her hand up.
So what I would say is and I think perhaps this is what you're also saying, Chief, is there's an enormous difference between environments, and the unknown environment really requires a show that having people show up in uniform and in confident, calm, but authoritative manner that is assessing in an environment where you don't know what is there. I mean, in any of the hospitals or ERs or whatever, that's controlled environment in terms of if you have access to weapons, if you have access to substances that you can spur of the moment ingest. So it's really a different type of situation. Not to say that de-escalation techniques aren't useful for everyone to be trained in and to use. And I know with the crisis intervention teams that sometimes accompany the police officers, that's what they're doing. But the big difference is the dangerousness of the environment. And the reason why it's dangerous is because it's unknown.
Absolutely. And family members, when you go to somebody's house, it's more of a territorial. Even family members will rile up subjects as well. So it's, like she said, it's the unknown in a uncontrolled environment.
Mhm. I hear you. I understand the difference that context gives the situation. So I hear you. My other question has to do with going back to the document itself. I'm just wondering if there's, maybe I'm missing it, but I'm just wondering if there are statements aimed at making sure that part of the procedure is that the safety of the individual for whom the call is for is being guarded. I mean, there's statements about everyone's safety, but it seems to me that maybe paramount in the response would be making sure that the individual, him or herself, is safe. I just don't see that mentioned. And I might be missing it because
I think that was
we could just
part
change-
of what Moira brought up earlier in the policy about if an emotionally disturbed person is not dangerous, the person should be contained. Perhaps that's the part under which needs to be elaborated on, as Moira suggested. That would answer that.
Okay. I guess I'm just seconding what Moira said then.
I guess one follow-up on the document. The last paragraph is talking about preparation of an incident report. And is there any practice where once an incident report is prepared, does that generate follow-up or trying to coordinate services if it's applicable, or any kind of specific action once the incident report is generated in a mental health scenario?
That would, a supervisor would follow up with this, with the incidents, every incident, whether it's a simple mailbox being hit by a baseball bat to, I mean, everything. We follow up with everything. We review the incident reports and then make the determination from there. Back to Nikki as well. We could change number 3 in procedure as well. So it says ensure the safety of others in the area of, you know, the subject and the safety of others in the area. We could do something like that as well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I know some folks are, some folks suffering from an incident are indeed, tend towards a violent reaction, but not everyone does. So I just want to make sure that we're covering all categories in your documentation.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
I just have a question about number 8. Arrange for the assistance of crisis intervention if possible. What would be the factor where it's not possible? What's the scenario?
So say it happens at 2 a.m. and these subjects are unable to be reached at that specific time. We would end up transporting them obviously to the hospital and then follow up with them in the next available time. So a supervisor would contact either Mr. Edwards or Mr. Giuliano at a later date.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Oh, I apologize. Miss Edwards.
Are any of these procedures changed if you were called to a school, whether it was middle school, high school, or elementary school?
That also goes back to what Stephen brought up, and I'm going to look into as well. But as far as dealing with children, we would, our youth officer would be available. He's trained as well as our sergeant in juveniles.
Anything in the school, where the school's going to be involved in any interaction within the school setting.
Exactly. So your school already has social workers and guidance counselors that would be made available. So once again, the police, if he's violent or he's causing a disturbance and they need somebody to subdue him or take him into just calm him down, de-escalate the situation, and then we could get the help, whether the school wants to take it, get the parents over there. And that's what we're basically going to follow, the school's guidance. Anybody? Nope. All right, so no, that's it. All right. So let's gonna move on to domestic violence. So just give me a moment here. All right.
So
Violence.
if I could just start on that.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to understand under 2E, what would make interviewing the available parties and witnesses separately not practical?
Exactly. So it's one officer responding by themselves, which is a huge problem for Lewisboro Police, as we only have one officer working.
Okay.
So if we're going to separate the individuals, it's kind of a officer safety concern, because
Right.
you're not going to have them be on their own in a separate room or access to weapons. You still have, there's the unknown, and that's what you're trying to figure out and assess the situation.
So should there be a sentence on there that just to ensure, in terms of addressing that, in terms of the safety of the officers, just that states when there's more than one officer that responds, that sort of just clarifies it? I feel like if practical sort of is a little too loose, when we're really trying to do is hedge safety of the officer.
Yeah, I'm just gonna jot that down. Section 2. So separate if 2 officers are available.
Right. And then, does anybody else have it, before I take you to another section, does anybody else have anything for that section, sworn members?
I just had one question on the definitions. The members of the same family or household. It doesn't seem to incorporate roommates in a home.
They wouldn't, is there, I think because you, Chief, I think it's because you focused on intimate partner, right?
Yes, correct, because that's what domestic violence usually falls under.
So you can be 2 roommates, but not have an intimate relationship. is
Right.
where he's going.
It shouldn't have just any of these procedures. If you have any of these procedures going to come into play, that's what I'm saying. It's not included. That's my point.
It would, well, that would be a different subject area in the department manual.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be a disturbance or whatever the case may be. It would just be another call. It wouldn't be categorized as a domestic violence.
Fair enough. Okay.
There's no relationship.
Gotcha.
If we could go to family offenses.
Okay.
In the paragraph, it states, sworn members making arrests for certain designated family offenses involving members of the same family or household shall advise complainants that they may choose to have such offenses prosecuted in either or both the family and criminal courts. I think you just need a little bit more clarification there. First of all, in the description prior, they did not have to be members of the same family or household. They could have been past intimate partners. And also with regard to referring to such offenses can be prosecuted in either or both, I think maybe some clarification as to the family court system. It's not a prosecution.
Okay. Patricia, are you able to email me this tomorrow with your recommendations? Just so I don't
Sure.
sit down and waste everybody's time tonight.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
no problem.
And basically what you're stating, a person has, they can either go to criminal court or family court.
Or both.
Or both. So if there's a domestic violence and you can't, an officer doesn't want to attempt to influence the choice of court either.
Right.
Quick question about disorderly conduct. It's in the family offenses, does need not be in a public place. I thought that was not one of the elements that for disorderly conduct, doesn't have a third person have to hear it or something?
Yes, so domestic violence kind of changes the statute for disorderly conduct offenses.
Okay.
Because usually a normal disorderly conduct, a police officer would have to witness. As in domestic violence, you wouldn't have to witness it.
Okay.
And I just have a question too. What if, when you talk about arrest considerations, is it ever a consideration whether there was a past order of protection or criminal order of protection between the same 2 parties?
Absolutely. I didn't put that in there because sometimes you just don't have that knowledge.
But is there something that a responding officer could do to check or see so that like a potential arrest is not skipped?
I mean, It's tough. Once again, we have one officer responding, so we don't have a dispatcher. Our dispatch is down in Hawthorne. So we do have e-justice capabilities. However, you're not going to leave the people alone while you go out to your car to check on your computer.
Right.
So it's, once again, the need for 2 officers working at all times.
And there is a section on considerations of orders of protection when known, I think,
Yes.
13, 14.
13 and 14 order protection considerations.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you'll go and they'll say they have, they have an order of protection, but they don't have it with them, a copy of it, which they should have at all times.
Right. Further down in there, I believe it's number 11. When arresting suspects in domestic incidents, advise the victims that they could be released at any time without notice to them. Somewhere in here, do we also, I see that you tell them you're doing it so that they can take safety precautions, but at what point are you putting them in contact with resources for that?
Every domestic violence call our officers go to, we put them in touch with the resources. And that,
Okay.
I mean, I could go down the list if you want. It's a very lengthy
Yep.
list, and I'm sure you're aware
I'm
of.
sure.
Yeah. It's also on the domestic violence form as well. You're giving them the copy, and it has all the resources.
So it's verbal and in
Provide
written form.
initiatives. I'm sorry, Andrea, I cut you off.
It's verbal and in written form.
Correct. And we also do a lethality check, which is new to the county. It's countywide now. Let me just find that. And we've been doing it for a number of years, Pound Ridge, North Salem, Somers, and state police here that respond to these 4 towns. And Chief Ryan out of Pound Ridge has really been taking the initiative on this, as well as Hope's Door and everyone else. Basically, it's a Northern Westchester risk reduction team. It started with Bedford, Lewisboro, North Salem, Pound Ridge, Somers, and the state police. And you go through a series of questions. There's 12 questions. And if they answer yes to any of the questions of 1, 2, or 3, it automatically triggers a referral to the domestic violence liaison office. And currently they have 24/7 call lap line. So once again, domestic violence, if you have any, sorry, just trying to, if you have any, if this triggers a question, you're going to contact the phone, call this number, and you're going to put the victim on with a social worker, and they're going to talk to them and provide them with guidance from there, as well as questions 4 through 12. If any positive responses to 4 of the questions, will also trigger the same referral to that 24/7 monitored lap line. And then they have a flow chart that they go through. So the victim talks to the Westchester Medical Center lap line advocate, and then that advocate provides immediate safety planning to the victim, whether it's shelter or housing referrals are given. You have Westchester domestic violence shelters, domestic and social services shelters, housing, emergency housing. You also have the advocate emails an intake form to the domestic violence service provider. And then they also put them in charge of office for women as well, who provides lawyers and other assistance financially, et cetera. So there's a lot of resources out there when it comes to domestic violence as well as mental health.
Is there a line that you think would be appropriate to include in your procedure that certain, at some point indicating that a lap should be done?
Yes, so at the section, number 24, it'll say the appropriate forms and reports may be appropriate. Northern Westchester Risk Reduction Team,
Okay.
domestic violence lethality screening. And again, the officers are all trained in this yearly, so I don't want to spend, another page or two outlining exactly what they have to do when they're trained in this yearly.
Right.
It's just repetitive. And it's all on the form as well, that they're required to fill out as per chief's order.
Dave, quick question.
Yes, Ron.
Most of both of these topics are things that we aren't going to cure with a 911 call, whether mental illness or domestic abuse. But certainly just on the topic of domestic abuse, do you keep, Peter referred to earlier, the repetitious calls. In domestic abuse, there are several things I could say. I think the schools are really, the teachers, if they are really teaching the whole kid and not the subject, are also another line of defense. But I don't know how that would work in with the police department. But you would be surprised at how many teachers are the original reporters, because kids talk to them and they do that. But I'm also aware of the reality of the situations. A lot of principals don't want to have the teachers called, even though that's a violation of state law for them not to, if they think something is wrong. But what I'm trying to say is that I'm sure there are minds at the county greater than mine who, when you get a second or third domestic abuse call, the odds are that's been going on for years. And even if the person is not arrested, I'm wondering if someone at the county, somehow that's flagged, that that's a household where that woman should be made aware. Because many times what I learned from my wife over the years, she dealt with that during part of her professional career. The women are afraid, and the children are afraid, and they are embarrassed. And when you get the call, she then may not want to refer for a lot of reasons. Economically, she's afraid she has nowhere to go. He's holding finances over her head. He's holding fear of violence over her head, so she's willing to lie. She may just feel that she has no out. And I am just saying that in calls like that, somehow the county or something, if any police department is, I would say, I'm just throwing this out there for me. If in 2 years you get 2 domestic calls to the same house, social workers or some people should try to find the other partner, at some time, to make them aware that, your life is not coming to an end, and don't let this man hold this over your head, that you have nowhere to go. I'll take the kids from you, I'll kill you if you say anyone. I've seen things like that and been part of that during my school career. And if I must say so, even within my church here within St. John's. So, this goes on, and not to talk about it. But I just want to be clear, calling the police there at a 911 in this town where the officer, may go by himself. I was pleased to see that you try to call the state police or someone, because to have this person walk into a scene, the first 10 times maybe, able, but the 11th time you're putting your life on the line and you don't know what is going on. And Lewisboro is as heavily armed as any other place. I would be surprised if there wasn't a gun in everybody's home.
Absolutely. And there are new protocols as well when it comes to taking weapons out of the home temporarily until we kind of reassess the situation. So that law became effective November 1st. And that's that highlighted section that I'm still trying to get some more clarification. I've reached out to the ADA's office regarding that section that was highlighted in the domestic violence handout that I sent to everybody. But you're absolutely right, Ronald. Again, this is what we are trained to do. Every year we go over this. I know my officers, when they respond to a domestic violence incident, Sometimes you could tell that the victim, that there's more to tell and they're not giving out this information because of what you explained. So we do take that into consideration. And whenever a lethality form is filled out, which is basically any yes to those 3 questions or any of the 4, the next day, a supervisor or domestic violence liaison, which is actually Officer Hulse, will follow up and they will call the victim the following day and ask certain questions. We will also, if it's an arrest was made, and there's a temporary order of protection, we will provide house checks. Every shift we'll drive by the home. We'll show a presence just driving by the home itself. Note the suspect's vehicle that was arrested, and have all that information so everyone's aware of in our police department. Yes, Andrea.
So could you just explain the difference between the laws that exist now and how this would change? Because being a criminal defense attorney, I know that when someone is arrested on a domestic violence charge and they're arraigned, which is typically within 24 hours, that a temporary order of protection is issued. And one of the conditions of that temporary order of protection is the surrender of firearms and weapons. So the addition of this new law as of November, how does that change or alter, or how is it different from the order of protection?
I'm still trying to figure out and get a little more guidance on that one, Andrea, because it's still, I literally found out about it November 15th. So I reached out to the district attorney's office, and I'm sure, the holiday and everything, it was just a delay in them getting back to me. So I'm trying to get some guidance on that new law. Okay. But also to elaborate on what Andrea was saying as well, if there is an arrest made, you do arraign the person, no matter what charge it is. So we would take that person into custody, arraign them before a judge, and that judge would issue an order, a temporary order of protection, which would be a full stay away from the victim. And again, surrender all firearms, weapons, et cetera, et cetera. It'll be outlined in that TOP, which is a temporary order of protection. Copy would be given to the victim. They'd be followed up with that exactly what happened after the arraignment. And we'd go from there. And again, another reason why there should be more than one officer for processing an individual. It's just absurd that one police officer is going to be making an arrest, bringing them back to headquarters and processing them, where you actually have to take handcuffs off them to fingerprint them.
Almost everything we're saying, without being explicit, assumes this is an incident between intimate partners or partners of some kind. How often is domestic violence directed at children?
I don't know exactly what you're getting at, Mr. Parsons.
Well, parents beating up a kid.
It'd be more
Child abuse.
That's child abuse rather than domestic abuse?
Correct.
Okay.
I think if it was the other way around, where you have a child assaulting a parent or a caregiver, then it would fall under the domestic violence umbrella.
All right.
Yeah, we'll get call. I mean, we've had some calls where it's borderline domestic violence with children and parents. For example, my son won't do his homework, and then it turns into some verbal argument, or I want to go out tonight, or one of those incidents where the child or the parent will call 911 for guidance.
Okay.
Yes, Nikki.
Chief, I just want to go back a little bit in discussion. You were talking about filing the lethality screening report, and you mentioned that that would be in the context of submitting a bunch of other forms or reports, and that's all part of training. I just was a little hazy on what does that mean? Like, what kind of training are you talking about, and how does it determine which forms need to be filled out? I guess it seems like
So every year we have your typical in-service training, and we go above and beyond too, that are the New York State standards from Department of Criminal Justice. And the forms that would be filled out would be, if it's a domestic violence, you would fill out a domestic incident report, which is a New York State mandate. And that form actually gets filed with New York State. So a copy goes up to Albany, and then a copy gets given to the victim, and the copy also stays in our headquarters as well. And then if any of these domestic violence incidents that we go to on the scene actually turn up to be a little more serious, then we fill out this lethality form. And I'll give you an example. The 3 questions that'll trigger the lethality form is, has he/she ever used a weapon against you or threatened you with a weapon? And it'd be yes, no, non-applicable. Number 2 would be, has he/she ever threatened to kill you or your children? Number 3 would be, do you think he/she might try to kill you? And if any questions or any answers that are yes to those 3 questions will automatically trigger us to contact the hotline for Hope Store Client Hotline, actually, which is the county now. I'm sorry, I changed to the county form. So we would contact a social worker who would actually get on the phone with the victim if they choose to get on the phone, and they will talk to them in significant detail on how to get them help, a safe place to stay for the night, etc. And then there's questions 4 through 12. If they answer yes to any 4 of those questions, which I'll run through right now. Number 4, does he or she have a gun, or can he or she get easily? Number 5, has he or she ever tried to choke you or obstructed your breathing? Number 6, is he/she violently or constantly jealous, or does he/she control most of your daily activities? Number 7, have you left him/her or separated after living together or being married? Number 8, is he/she unemployed? Number 9, has he/she ever tried to kill himself or herself? Number 10, do you have a child that he/she knows is not his/hers? Number 11, does he or she follow or spy on you or leave threatening messages? Number 12, is there anything else that worries you about your safety? If yes, what worries you? So any 4 of those questions, if there's a yes, that'll trigger the same referral.
So the training details of how to go through this are somewhere else, right? They're not.
Yeah, that's given yearly to all my officers at all hands department meeting.
Okay.
That's what we're going for any updates. Yeah, and then any legal updates throughout the year. I usually have about 4 or 5 all hands department meetings spread out through the year. Legal updates, changes in laws, everything.
If there's a domestic, it's a little bit on side point. If there's a domestic call and 911 or otherwise, and then the person who called calls back and says everything's okay, that's still a mandatory. You have to go in person and check that out, regardless of the follow-up on that, right?
Yeah, if there's a 911 hang up, we're still showing up to that call. Okay. Regardless.
David, one just point of clarification there on those 12 questions. Would there ever be a situation where just one officer is responding? You can't separate them at that point. So what would you wait until the state police or some other person showed up? Or ask those questions in front of the 2 of them?
You could actually, it's a form that we carry, so we would actually hand the person the form if it came down to that. So they could fill it out themselves if the other person could hear you. But it's just, Ron, it all comes down to the situation, and each scenario is different. I mean,
Yeah, that's it.
You could do it's easy to read people, where, sometimes you could, keep the subject, in the other room. A lot of times you contact dispatch and find out what the ETA, which is the estimated time of arrival of a troop to the scene is. I mean, I know when I'm working during the day as a chief, I will drop everything I'm doing and respond to the call that my one officer's out there. Because I mean, that's just me. Because I know sometimes it could be in a timely manner. You know, these are hot topics. So you don't want anything bad to happen. You want to get people help as soon as you can. Anybody else? No? Mr. Parsons, it looks like this pretty much wraps it up.
Yep. Anybody want to make any general comments? Otherwise, we can all go home and try to avoid COVID-19.
I have a
Oh,
question.
Andrea.
Sorry, the last meeting, we talked about if any of us had any comments or suggestions with regard to language, that we were to email the entire committee so that we could all look at it and have an opportunity to discuss it. I didn't receive any emails. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything because there was a lot of talk about language last time. So I just want to make sure I didn't miss anybody's email.
Just to follow up with that as well, I never received any emails from anybody as well, other than Patricia with one email. But there's more of a question.
I'm guilty. I'll send mine tomorrow.
Oh.
I appreciate it. And again, if Patricia, Moria, if you could please email me those inputs. I believe Mr. Stephen, regarding the 18-year-olds, I have that written down, 18 and under. And I'll do my homework and get back to everybody. And hopefully I could get an answer on this, the new law that was effective November 1st regarding the weapons and everything.
I just have one more comment, and it was
Sure.
something that came up at the last town board meeting. And it was something that I think people need to understand, and I think was also touched upon by Jen Castellano, is that at the level of town government, town government doesn't have the authority to start its own Department of Social Services. It's not at the level of town government. We need to take that into consideration when we're looking at reviewing our policy and procedure, that social workers and social services and things of that nature fall upon the county and the state, to which Dave has indicated our police department is well tapped into. So I think that as far as the public is concerned, when they're observing these meetings, and I'm sure many of them will follow up, perhaps with comments to the committee or to the supervisor or to you, Dave, that they should keep that in mind, that that's something that as a town is not within our realm of control, so to speak. So, you know, when we talk about the idea of sending out social workers on police calls and things of that nature, it's not something that works on the level of town government. It only works in coordination with the county. So that's it.
Not even in Harrison?
Not even in Harrison.
Because Ron might try.
Harrison has a food pantry, unlike any other town in the state.
All
but
right.
They do not have a Department of Social Services.
All right, I'm having fun if you didn't.
Yes,
know.
you are.
Is that just like, is that a legal thing or that's just a practice tradition kind of thing? Just
The
curious.
breakdown of government. So when you look to the levels of government and what each level of government is tasked to do, that is not a town government thing. There's no Department of Social Services within the town. It may be a city thing like New York City, but not a town, not a village. In our particular case, it is county.
I mean, there's no provision in the town law is what you're getting at. I think.
Yes.
Yeah, the town is regulated by state law,
Yes.
which pretty clearly sets out what we can do and can't do. And our biggest area of complete control is probably use of land or land use. But after that, then it gets more iffy on the whole.
Unrelated.
Linda, Mara, did you want to speak? Mara?
I was just saying good night.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Night, everybody.
Good night, and thank you all very much.
Good night.
Thank you.
Right.
Night.
Thanks.